Welcome to another season preview, and today we have the Kansas City Chiefs. What more is there to say about the Kansas City Chiefs that hasn't already been said? They're a dynasty. The team simply keeps winning. I don't know when it'll end. As long as they have guys like Patrick Mahomes at quarterback, Andy Reid calling the shots on offense, and Steve Spagnuolo calling the shots on defense, they're going to have a good chance at winning the Super Bowl. Being a team so tightly pressed up against the cap year in and year out due to having so many playmakers can be difficult, but they seem to thread the needle perfectly every single year. I think the biggest issue the Chiefs had in 2024 that prevented them from winning that final Super Bowl matchup was the left side of the offensive line and the weapons that Patrick Mahomes had at his disposal. So let's start with Patrick Mahomes. He, I think, is undisputably the greatest player and greatest quarterback in this era of quarterbacks. He's leading the Mount Rushmore that consists of Mahomes, Allen, Jackson, and Burrow. He's just been such a presence in the league, taking the torch directly from Tom Brady. I think it's really special, and I don't want to say it's undervalued because I do think that people understand it, but we are really witnessing greatness. However, 23 and 24 were not his best seasons. His best seasons were the ones prior to that. He has taken a step back the last 2 years. It'll be interesting to see if he can go back to that 2021-22 form. The problem is, in those years, he had guys like Tyreek Hill, prime Travis Kelce, these kind of guys that really made the offense extremely dynamic, and now it's more so thrust upon his shoulders directly to make plays. Last year in the backfield, it was Kareem Hunt and Isiah Pacheco until Pacheco got hurt, and then it was just Kareem Hunt. And now they'll be returning Pacheco, but I'm not going to lie to you, Pacheco wasn't a great mover before. He just kind of ran angry. And what I've been seeing from him since returning is he's just really not, he's moving slow. I'm not really moved. And then Kareem Hunt is a class of 2017 running back, so he's getting up there. And I'm not necessarily moved by him being my running back one or anything like that. They did bring in Elijah Mitchell from San Francisco, and they drafted Brashard Smith from SMU. Both of which I expect to receive touches at some point. Pacheco had a really good, 23? 7th round pick out of Rutgers. He was just, he came out of nowhere really and made an impact on a Super Bowl team. And that was what was so eye-popping about him, but I'm not that moved by him at the position in the current state. And then we got to talk about who's blocking for Mahomes and Pacheco. They traded away left guard / left tackle Joe Thuney to the Chicago Bears. This was a cap casualty. They wanted to pay Trey Smith, but they couldn't pay all of the interior guys and still managed to keep a functional roster. So they decided to trade the older player in Joe Thuney. He was their sacrifice. Thuney was a guy that really saved their season and allowed them to even get to the Super Bowl in the first place by being able to go from left guard to left tackle. That's a lot more rare than people realize. Last year, it was a combination of players on that left side. Kingsley Suamataia, Wanya Morris, the list goes on. But Suamataia will be looked at as that new left guard to replace Thuney on the inside. I also think Mike Caliendo, who largely filled in at left guard last year, could also be the starter, but I think they'll want to see what they have in Suamataia before all is said and done. And then left tackle, they draft Josh Simmons in the first round. Will he be ready week one? He's participating in training camp, and he's at full speed, so I would imagine that he's ready, and he looks good. You also have the Wanya Morris that was, there last year and was terrible. Then the center through right tackle is all the same. Creed Humphrey, Trey Smith, and Jawan Taylor. Humphrey and Smith could be the best interior pairing in the entire NFL. And then Jawan Taylor is not so great. In terms of depth, I'm not really moved. They have Jalen Moore from San Francisco on one side of the tackle room and then Wanya Morris on the other. And then I do like Mike Caliendo due to his experience on the starting lineup last year. But other than that, not too enthralled by their protection unit. Wide receiver room, I think, is interesting. You draft Xavier Worthy, which is, he just possesses the most unique gift of speed at the receiver position. He's just so light that he really needs to win with speed, and he needs to win convincingly in order to be a consistent option on the offense. And I think towards the stretch of the 24 season, they really got Worthy going and found his role within the offense. Depending on the suspension that Rashee Rice receives, he will be available. There will be a suspension. I'm assuming it's going to be for like 4 games or something, and then he'll return, and the floor of the offense will raise significantly when he's back. And then Hollywood Brown is another receiver, just like Xavier Worthy, who I think kind of got into a groove as the season progressed with Reid and Mahomes and kind of figuring out his role in the offense. I think another offseason will really benefit Hollywood Brown. They also have Juju Smith-Schuster, who is a nice depth veteran receiver for the unit. I like him. I like him as a wide receiver 4. I think Juju Smith-Schuster is great. You can't rely on him to be a wide receiver 1 or maybe even 2 at this point, but wide receiver 4, that is great value for Juju Smith-Schuster. And then, unfortunately, they drafted one of my favorite wide receivers in the entire class. I believe he was my number 5 wide receiver in the class. They got him in the 4th round, Jalen Royals out of Utah State. I think he is so dynamic, so good after the catch. He's got great hands. He's a great asset close to the line of scrimmage. Allow him to just work with the ball in his hands. I think he's a really valuable addition and just what the doctor ordered for Andy Reid. They knew exactly what they were doing with this pick. I expect him to be much more of a contributor than people are letting on to think right now. And then other depth receivers, you've got guys like Tyquan Thornton, Jason Brownlee, Sky Morris still on the roster, Nico Remigio. I expect them to keep 6 receivers, and besides, you've got Rashee Rice, Hollywood Brown, Xavier Worthy, Juju Smith-Schuster, Jalen Royals. Those 5, I think, get a roster spot. And then I think, in my opinion, it is up to Tyquan Thornton and Sky Moore who is going to get the 6th spot, and I think it's going to come down to return man. And right now, the actual leader for return position on the Chiefs depth chart is actually Nico Remigio. So maybe he's the one that wins the 6th receiver spot. Either way, if Rashee Rice was playing a full 17-game season, I would predict him to be a 1,000-yard receiver. Since he's not, I'm going to predict that Xavier Worthy hits 1,000 yards, and I'm going to predict that Jalen Royals gets over 500, which as a 4th-round pick behind some solid depth is pretty impressive. So you've got a solid offense. There are certain positions that are really eye-popping and certain positions where they leave much to be desired. I'm interested to see how the run game works. Another year of tread on the tires for Kareem Hunt, a year coming off of injury for Isiah Pacheco, but it's Andy Reid calling the shots, so I'm certain that they'll get something going. On the defensive side of the ball, the Chiefs love to run a 3-4, and those 5 techs are George Karlaftis and Mike Dana. Both are really, really dynamic and quite effective. George Karlaftis, I do think, got overpaid just because I think that so many of his sacks are productions of Chris Jones or other guys on the roster, and he's kind of just cleaning up the mess in the backfield. But you need guys like that, so he's been very effective in his role. So you've got George Karlaftis and then Mike Dana on the edge, and then depth pieces as edge rushers. You drafted Ashton Gillott at Louisville. He was a top 150 player for me. I think he's really dynamic. You've got Felix Anudike Uzoma, who was a first-round pick in 23. Hasn't lived up to first-round pick hype, but I still like him as a depth player. And then you have Charles Omenihu and Malik Herring, both of which I think can be valuable depth pieces as well. In the trenches, hand in the dirt, 1 tech and 3 tech, you have Mike Pennell and Chris Jones. Can't get much better than Chris Jones. Mike Pennell's a solid defensive tackle next to him. And then in terms of depth, you have Jerry Tillery, one of my least favorite defensive tackles of all time. He does not move the needle for me. But they drafted one of my favorite players in the 25 draft in Omar Norman Lott out of Tennessee. He's a great pass rusher on the interior, and I think learning behind Chris Jones is going to prove to be a weapon And I expect Omar Norman-Lott to quickly become a fan favorite of the Kansas City Chiefs. Linebacker room is another interesting one. It's headlined by Nick Bolton, really strong middle linebacker who's been on the team since 2021 out of Missouri. Then on either side of him, at weak side, you have Drew Tranquil, great in coverage, converted safety from Notre Dame. And then on the other side, you have Leo Chenal, who I think is a blitz-heavy, get close to the line of scrimmage and get dirty type of player. In terms of depth at the linebacker position, you've got Jeffrey Bassa out of Oregon. I think he's a great coverage linebacker, another converted safety. And Drew Tranquil really doesn't move the needle for me. I could see Bassa taking a lot of his reps. Then we move to the secondary. At boundary corner, they signed Christian Fulton, who was on the Chargers last year and kind of had a comeback career resurgence after getting some injuries on the Titans. And then opposite of him, it's going to be interesting to see who they go. They could go Najee Johnson, who has been getting corner 2 reps. They could also go Jalen Watson or Noel Williams, who they drafted out of Cal. And then, of course, at nickel, they have one of the best corners in the game, regardless of where they play, and that's Trent McDuffie. He's going to shut down the between the hash marks area and just be that difference maker in the secondary. The safety room's going to look different. They lost Justin Reid, who I do think was a difference maker for them on defense. He was exactly what Spagnuolo wants on defense. They just could not pay him. So it's going to be Jaden Hicks, the 4th round pick in 2024 out of Washington State. One of my favorite players in that class as well. I'm not talking top 10, but I was definitely higher on him than the consensus. And then you have Brian Cook, who was a 2022 second-round pick out of Cincinnati. Cook has been getting some solid reps in the safety room over the last few years under Spagnuolo, but now it's going to be really his time to prove his worth. And then behind them, they have Mike Edwards, who was previously with Tampa Bay and Buffalo, but has been with the Chiefs before. Overall, this is one of my favorite defenses in the league. They're just so consistently good, and their blitz packages are so unique. They'll come at you from all angles, so I'm really interested to see how they utilize this team with, Mike Dana being the primary guy. Ashton Jala is an undersized edge rusher. How can Spagnuolo use him to be most effective? Now let's do the thing where we look at their schedule and determine what their record will be. The Chiefs start week 1 in Brazil against the Chargers on Friday night before returning home for week 2 to face the Eagles in a Super Bowl rematch. Then they travel East Coast to face the New York Giants and then host the Ravens the following week. I have the Chiefs starting the season 2-2. I think they could realistically drop any of these games besides probably the Giants, of course. I mean, there's a world where they lose to the Giants. It's just not this one. But I think it's realistic to say they could lose to any of the other 3 teams. I'm going to have them beating the Giants and one more of the other teams and then dropping 2. The next slate of games sees them travel to Jacksonville for a Monday night game against the Jaguars before hosting 3 straight games against the Lions, the Raiders, and then the Commanders on Monday Night Football. I'm going to have the Chiefs going 3-1 in this stretch. I think the most obvious possible loss is probably the Lions, and then it depends if the Commanders have Terry McLaurin back. Week 9, they travel to play the Bills before a Week 10 bye. They come out of the bye to face the Broncos in Denver before hosting the Colts and then finishing the month on Thanksgiving on the road against the Cowboys. I'm going to have the Chiefs going 3-1 in this stretch. The final stretch of the season sees them host the Texans and the Chargers back-to-back before traveling on the road to face the Titans, hosting the Broncos on Christmas, and then traveling to play the Raiders. I'm going to have the Chiefs going 4-1 in this stretch to finish the season. Yes, to finish the season 12-5. Sorry to do some math. I think the Chiefs finished the 2025 season 12-5. The Chiefs finishing 12-5 in 2025, I should be enough to win the AFC West because, especially with my predictions, I have the Chargers finishing 10-7 and the Broncos finishing, I believe, 11-6 is what I said. I think the Chiefs' floor is about 10 wins, 10-7. That sounds crazy to say for the Chiefs with Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. I think their ceiling is probably 13. So I'd put them in the middle. The thing that I want to bring into question is the devil magic. The Chiefs have been so lucky in terms of one-score games, outcomes decided by officiating anomalies. I'm not saying that they have won however many Super Bowls because of refs, because that's not true. They have won because they have built a great roster, they have great staffs, they have a great front office. What I'm saying is they have been on the winning side of a lot of 50-50 calls or controversial topics. If that continues, they could win 15. But if the law of averages and it starts to even out this year, they could go to 10. So we'll have to see. And it also depends, does Rashee Rice get suspended for 8 games or 4? That could be the difference in 1 or 2 more losses. So it's all very up in the air for the Chiefs still. I think they still have a lot to prove. I think Patrick Mahomes especially has a lot to prove, which might sound crazy to say. But he's got to prove, hey, Travis Kelce isn't in his prime anymore. I don't have a bona fide wide receiver 1, and I'm still getting it done. Or else, 3 years of just being like a top 10 quarterback instead of... You can be honest and say Patrick Mahomes the last 2 years, the last 2-year window, has not been a top 4 quarterback in the NFL. He's probably been around that 6th spot. The years before that, he was number 1, blowing everyone out of the water. But he's not been who he used to be. So if he still can't get back to that best quarterback in the league conversation after this year, then we're going to have some talks about him, about how, he is no longer what he used to be. But as of right now, everybody's willing to give him a pass, and I am too. But he's got to go out there and prove it in 2025. So a 12-5 record may be enough for him to prove it. We'll have to see. But until next time, I'm all done with the AFC. So now we're on to the NFC season predictions, and I will see you then. Adios.